Welcome to our parent information session of Open Parachute, a comprehensive support tool that targets the health and well-being of our students, teachers, and while also supporting our parents and caregivers to engage in conversations and strategies to support all our young people. As I work through the presentation, please ask any questions in the chat window. I'll do my best to answer them as we go along. I've had the opportunity to engage with this program on a level as principal, educator, and as a parent. And across each, it ticks a lot of boxes as we continue to support our young learners. I would also like to begin by thanking Haley Watson, founder of Open Parachute, and Guy Sebastian and the Sebastian Foundation, who has fully sponsored our school and any costs associated with this program at Belgian Garden State School. Throughout the session, we will look at how and why we have decided to bring this program to BG, what it will look like through the eyes of our students, teachers, and parents and caregivers. At the end of the presentation, I will be forwarding a parent resource, which we will look closer at near the end of our presentation, that will give you access to the suite of parent resources available. As mentioned in the previous slide, Open Parachute has been funded for BG via the Sebastian Foundation for 2023. However, it's unclear what this funding will look like moving into 2024. For 2023, it will coexist with the Resilience Project. Understanding there will be some overlap of concepts, aspects of Open Parachute, as you will later hear, complement the Resilience Project and vice versa. Although I loathe making health and well-being a business decision, I'm not sure the school can sustain both programs if we had to fund Open Parachute and the Resilience Project. This is why we will be doing our due diligence to determine, if we have to, which program moving forward will create the most positive impact on all of our stakeholders. The strength of Open Parachute is that it encompasses 3 tiers of support. The first being the student, second the teacher or educator, and third the parent. Students will spend the majority of their life with both their teachers and parents up until the age of 18, therefore making these role models pivotal in identifying and supporting mental health. Our students' mental health and well-being are paramount, and in this day and age where things like social media, COVID social isolation, bullying, and anxiety are creating more of an impact, it is more important than ever to be proactive in supporting mental health issues. We simply just can't stand in front of our students and tell them, hey, if you do this and this, then you should feel this, so complete this activity and you will be okay and mentally healthy. The strength of Open Parachute, as you will see, is its ability to deeply engage learners age appropriately by leveraging real-world examples and experiences and emotions that our young people are going through. Our educators' health and well-being is also vitally important, as the notion of just being a teacher has largely disappeared from our society and that of societies across the globe, and now encompasses aspects within a role that resembles psychology, youth worker, role model, child safety advocate, counselor, and the list could go on. As an educator, the mental health of our young people largely dictates how successful they will be when engaging at school and in the curriculum. To foster a love of learning, students need to be free from the shackles of whatever is bothering them or impacting on them socially and emotionally. Parents and caregivers too need to be equipped to have sometimes those confronting, challenging, and supportive conversations with their young people. Conversations that, speaking with my parent head on, push the limits of my expertise and ability to engage in a meaningful and effective conversation with my child. The line of sight that is created through the multiple tiers of support will help support our young people on a much deeper level than before. With a consistent approach and the consistent use of language across the Open Parachute platform, educators and parents and caregivers can collaboratively target those mental health issues impacting our kids. The resources, as mentioned, are age-appropriate and built around a multimodal delivery approach. Teachers have ready access to not only their own year-level resources, but all year levels. To support us in making an informed decision, there are analytical tools built within the program that help us gauge student impact. Cohort surveys and lesson exit tickets will support us in making an informed decision around the program effectiveness. We will be doing a staged rollout from the start of Term 2. Cohorts will nominate to be part of the initial rollout. I will now turn to Haley, who will do a deeper dive around what the program looks like and how it operates across those 3 tiers: student, educator, and parent.
Hi, I'm Haley and welcome to Open Parachute. I'm the creator of this program and I'm really excited to introduce it to you. So I'm going to start with giving you a bit of an overview of what we're aiming to achieve with Open Parachute and then talk you through how we do this. And then I'll jump into getting into specifics of how you actually run the program in your classes. So I've been doing research and working with schools to develop programs for about 15 years. And when we first start talking about mental health in a school setting, usually the conversation starts with mental health resources. So these are tips and tools for helping students cope. Things like taking a deep breath when we're stressed, thinking a happy thought, identifying which feelings we're feeling, or having a school counselor on hand to make sure that we're mitigating risk. Now, these are vital, but they're really just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to mental health. And if we're only talking about those pieces, it becomes a shallow conversation because we're not getting to the heart of why these students are struggling. Why are they lacking resilience? Why are they struggling to communicate with their peers? And that is a much deeper conversation. We need to take into account trauma patterns, family patterns, cultural inequalities, stressors around social media, body image, all of these big, challenging topics that are real events in students' lives. So we can do this in schools if we focus on 3 key areas. The first is building resilience in students. But the question we have to ask here is, how do we help students live the learning? How do we make sure that it's not just us as adults telling students what to do, but that we're actually engaging them in the learning process and in the process of practicing skills? The second piece is building up confidence in teachers. So making sure that every teacher knows how to have a therapeutic response, even though they're not a therapist, and making sure that those 2 distinct roles are clear. And the final piece is building up skilled role models in the community. So this means upskilling parents to the best of our ability and also making sure that educators are practicing well-being skills as well, so that when students look around, they see all of us as adults practicing the same things that we're asking them to engage with. Now, when we work with school leaders and leadership teams that really get this and implement this across the school, what we cultivate in students is what we call courageous independence. Now, what this means is that when a student is struggling with anything at any point in their life, they first of all have the courage to acknowledge and identify their struggle. So they can say, I'm sad, I'm scared, I'm overwhelmed. They know what's happening in them, and that's a skill. The second skill is the skill of independence. So to be able to know what to do to help themselves, which might mean asking for help. It might mean setting a boundary with someone. It might mean not doing the things that their peers are doing. And the whole aim of Open Parachute is to teach every single student both of those key skills. So now I'm going to talk you through our theoretical model, which is called the Being Well model. And this will show you how we bring these resources to life in a school setting. Now, it's really important that any resource you use has a strong foundation and structure behind it. So I'll jump into showing you ours. There are 3 key parts to this model. The first is creating reflective learning experiences for students to make sure that they begin to live the learning. Now, we do this in a really unique way. All of our lessons are based around documentary stories of real young people sharing their own experiences of overcoming struggle, so that students are learning from kids their own age, which makes it feel safe for them to explore deeply about these topics. The next part of the model is that the resources are relatable, making it really easy to deliver this to students. The lessons are plug and play, meaning that there's no prior preparation required, and we position you as educators as facilitators rather than mental health experts. So there's no pressure to be an expert in an area that you're not specifically trained in. The lessons are built around hot topics that are engaging for students. so you can decide which topic areas are most relevant for your class. And the final part of the model is building up therapeutic responses in adults. Now, there's a few ways we do this. The first way is the hidden learning component. So by virtue of delivering the lessons, you as an educator can build up the skill set of how to have these conversations with students during class time. The second way is through our educator well-being resources that create a space for contemplative pause so that you as educators can practice these well-being skills yourselves. And the final way is through our parent resources that provide psychological coaching tools to support student well-being at home. So this framework and our resources make it easy for you to teach courageous independence to every single one of your students. Now I'm going to take you through some simple steps to get started running Open Parachute in your classes. The platform is really easy to use and navigate. In order to begin running Open Parachute lessons in class, there are 4 key areas that you can choose to cover with students. These are all found in the Getting Started section. Number 1, introduce the program to your class. You'll find a guide for explaining these resources to your students so that they know what to expect throughout the lessons. Number 2, run icebreakers. The purpose of the icebreakers is to make sure that every single one of your students feels safe and comfortable to talk about mental health. So you want to run these if your class doesn't know each other well, or if there are any class members that have had disagreements, or if it's the start of the school year. You can choose any number of these in any order to run, and just keeping in mind that the goal is to make sure that your students are comfortable with each other. Number 3, set class boundaries. If you haven't recently set boundaries in your class for respecting each other when discussing sensitive topics, we recommend doing this before you start the program, so that all of your students know that they're going to be respected when they start talking about things like mental health. So the way your first few classes might go is if your school has decided to run pre-programmed surveys to gather data, that would come first before you do any of these steps. That'll take about 15 to 20 minutes in your first class. And then at the end of that, you might just get to the What is Open Parachute section. Then in the next class, you jump into icebreakers. So you might run these for a whole class if your class doesn't know each other well or if they're a little bit uncomfortable. Or if they do know each other well, you might just run 1 or 2 for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then you jump into the boundary setting exercise. Now we're going to talk about how to run lessons with students. Before you run the lessons with students, you can review the teacher preparation section. Now this contains teaching notes, which cover everything you need to know, and student notes that you can print out so your students can follow along and write things down. Each topic area generally takes between 3 to 5 lessons. The lessons are about 15 minutes for kindergarten, about 20 minutes for grades 1 to 3, and about 30 minutes for grades 4 and above. These lessons can also be split up into shorter sections if you need. If you have a longer block, like 45 minutes or an hour, all of these lessons can be extended by just taking a little bit more time on each exercise. You can choose to run any topics in any order throughout the course of the program. Every time you start a topic area, it's really important that you finish all of the lessons in the topic over a series of classes, so that students can see all the steps that their peers in the videos took to make it through their struggles. The idea is not to rush through the content, but to give students the opportunity to reflect deeply. We want to go slow to go deep, because the slower we go, the more ability students have to really process and learn the skills. Ideally, you'll run this program for 1 class each week for as much of the school year as you can manage. The videos create a safe space for your students because a peer on screen is speaking vulnerably. And the exercises that come after each video are a chance for your students to practice the skills they need to overcome the challenge that's been presented in the video. As an educator, your role is to move through the videos and exercises on screen in front of your whole class and encourage them to participate and engage with the learning process. These lessons don't need any additional preparation or planning and can be used exactly as they're laid out. But you also always have the option to adjust each lesson to the comfort level of your classroom and yourself. For example, you can turn group discussions into journal activities or partner exercises, or turn journal activities into group discussions, depending on what your students need. Now, when you first start running the lessons, your class might respond in a few different ways. They might be really engaged and talkative, but they might also be shut down, they might feel uncomfortable, or they might be not engaged at all. That's completely normal, and there's a lot of reasons why students might react that way. If this is the case, there's a whole help article called "What Do I Do If My Students Don't Want to Talk?" that you can access in our Help Center. No matter what their comfort level is, the goal is to build mental health skills in students, which will look different for each student. Students not engaging in discussions does not mean that they're not engaged in the material. They might just need to observe for a while until their comfort level increases. If your students are reacting or resistant to the material, see our help article on managing student reactions. If you're feeling uncomfortable or hesitant with running any of these lessons, that's completely normal. You can ask a counselor or another teacher to come in on the first few classes with you so that you can really get a sense of how it runs and get a little bit more comfortable. And once you see these lessons being run, you'll see that you really do have all the skills you need to engage your students in these lessons. When you start running open parachute lessons, there are a number of things that will commonly happen in a classroom. Depending on where your students are in their mental health journey, they'll likely fall into one of 4 categories. It's important to understand that every student will be at one of these levels of mental health engagement, whether we do any sort of intervention or not. And the purpose of the program is to give you a simple, structured pathway to move your students towards being more and more comfortable with mental health, so that they have the tools to help themselves thrive. So when we're thinking about a student's journey with us as educators, we have them for a few precious years before we're hoping to prepare them for being future leaders in their communities. During this time, we hope to help them become wise aware when it comes to mental health, meaning that they'll be comfortable discussing and exploring all of the challenges they face, so that they can effectively problem solve any setbacks they encounter and help their peers do the same. Now, you might already have students in your class who are at this level. These are the students that jump into discussions right away and lead their class to becoming more wise and more aware as well. It's fantastic if you have a student in your class that's in this category, because it means that the exercises will flow without you needing to lead or guide it much at all. In the second category are students who appear to be fine, even happy, and on the surface don't seem to have any challenges that need attention. We call this category insta-happy because there's still a huge focus on the image of perfection, appearing happy, seeming like we have it all together. You can tell if a student is insta-happy or wise aware the second you bring up confronting topics that challenge them to look inward. The insta-happy student won't really want to face the challenge. They might say things like, "I don't need to talk about mental health. I'm fine." Or, "I can't relate to this because I don't have any issues." When we hear that language, that's a sign that these students have fallen into the pitfall that's so common in our world right now, which is believing that the goal is happiness and perfection, not wisdom and resilience. You'll most likely have some of these students, and with these ones, we have to be a little bit more direct. So we want to encourage them to reflect a little bit more deeply, think a little harder, try a bit more to engage on a deeper level. In the third category, we have students who are struggling for a variety of reasons, maybe with peers, maybe with family challenges or school stress, and so they react to most things that challenge them. They might get upset by things their peers say. They might get overwhelmed with school assignments, and they will most likely have reactions to the material in these lessons. They might get quiet and shut down, or they might get visibly upset, or say things that suggest they're not coping. For these students, we want to be kind and respectful, while at the same time encouraging them to stay present and to stick with it so that they can learn skills that will help them with all of the challenges that they face. Now, we never want to push students to do something they don't want to do. So if they're uncomfortable with large class discussions, you can put them into smaller groups or allow them to privately write their answers to questions in the student notes and hand them in to you. It's important to remember with this category of student that part of what's holding them back is the fear about getting started. It's a little bit like any of us when we're really unfit and out of shape and we're asked to do exercise. We've all been there. It doesn't feel nice, and we would rather avoid it. But when we're encouraged to participate in some way, we always eventually feel the benefit. We wouldn't not introduce the concept of exercise to children in school if it made them uncomfortable, because we know the important health benefits that it brings. And in the same way, we don't want to disadvantage students from learning about mental health just because it's something that's a little bit harder for them. If you have these students in your class, you might want to have a school counselor or another colleague co-teach the first lesson with you so that you can have a little help adjusting the lessons to meet the needs of your students. If you're doing it on your own, you might want to spend a little bit of time thinking through how you'll run the lessons. Like maybe every time a class discussion comes up, you know that you'll turn that into a partner discussion. Things like that. You don't need to create or prepare anything extra. You just want to know that this is a possibility so that you're not caught off guard if you have students reacting to the material. In the final category are students who have faced a great deal of trauma and who have most likely never spoken about mental health before. They'll appear chaotic in their actions. They might resist schoolwork. They might be cruel or unkind to classmates. They might have patterns of addiction and make unhelpful choices for themselves. And they will most likely resist this material. They might reject the concept of learning about mental health. They might make fun of the students on screen or each other, or they might refuse to participate. This is a normal reaction for students who are overwhelmed with their own challenges and frightened about exploring or exposing them. If we extend the analogy from before, this is a bit like starting to exercise when we've never exercised before, and we've actually had some trauma around exercise, so it's really scary for us even thinking about putting on gym shoes. These students might need to observe for a while and not be forced to participate. Or they might need to be split up into smaller groups where they feel safer. Or they might even need to run through these lessons with a teacher or counselor in a one-on-one setting. If you know that you have students in this category, then you definitely want to involve the well-being team at your school so that you can be supported in navigating these reactions while still encouraging students to the best of their abilities. So as an educator, what matters here are the lines that connect the current reality to the future for our students. None of them start out their lives in the chaotic category, but they will drift there over time if we don't, as a society, take any action to help them. Now, if we take action, but we're only triaging the struggles that we see, then students will remain in the struggle category because that's all we're addressing. If we're giving them tools, but only focusing on the uplifting side of mental health, then they'll feel supported, but they won't make it past the desire to be insta-happy. Only if we directly address the challenges that all our students will face at some point in their lives and give them tools and encouragement to explore these challenges, will they learn how to be wise aware and be able to face their challenges head on. This is why we've created these resources, and this is the incredible gift that you're giving your students by facilitating these lessons. If you have any questions, send them to us. I can answer them live on office hours, or you can message us on live chat anytime. Remember, no matter what reaction you see in students, giving them the space to build skills of courageous independence is the most helpful learning you can offer them. The more they lean in now, the more helpful choices they'll make for their own well-being long into the future.
Regardless of whether you attended tonight's session, I will be circulating the parent resources to the whole school parent body. Please feel free to use them as you see fit and access them to support your parenting journey and your child's journey through childhood and adolescence. You can access the resources to even support a child that may be at high school or beyond. One thing I think our system does not do well, and this is not necessarily the fault of our system, but perhaps an evolutionary step as we look to prioritize student well-being, is that we tend to have a knee-jerk reaction around referring students too quickly to medical professionals, before having an option to engage in building our own knowledge base and implement strategies at home that can really make an impact with our children. I know this resource will help here in this regard. As a parent, I know I will be accessing the many topics prepared by Haley. I know, as a dad, I certainly don't have all the answers and definitely will need the support as my kids grow and continue to experience mental health and well-being challenges along the way. If you have any questions, please feel free to discuss this with your teacher at our three-way conversations or email myself at school. That concludes tonight's presentation. I'll stay on Teams for a little bit longer if anyone has any questions. Thanks for joining me and have a lovely evening.